Today we'll take a closer look at the formula column feature, which lets you add new columns to the existing dataset on a row level. It's an extremely powerful and versatile feature, so we'll take a look at some of the most common examples that we see our users applying on a daily basis. But don't forget that we also have a dedicated article explaining every single formula that we support with examples and syntax. So we'll link that to the description of the video, and then for any questions you may have, get in touch with our support, we will help. So let's take a look at some examples. This is where you'll find this in transformations in the feature menu over here. I've already preloaded a few different data sources. So let's take a look at some of the more basic and some of the more complex applications of this feature. So number one, I have my Google Search Console data extracted in here with all the metrics that I'm interested in. And one of the things with Google Search Console is you can only get data broken down on a daily basis. So if my data sets get extremely large and I want to send it to something like Looker Studio, it makes sense to aggregate the data before you extract it to Looker to make dashboards load faster and widgets render, without lag and everything. It makes sense to derive new columns and aggregate it on a week and monthly basis before we send it to Looker Studio. With the help of the formula feature, we can do exactly that. So I used this start of time based on the date column. I'm interested in week, and then I also want to format it as year, month, and date. If I leave it like this, it's going to result in a string column. So I also added a date parse function that makes the string into a date. So a little bit of a workaround, but ultimately what I get is a date column with the week based on the date. And identical thing would be with the month. As you can see, same formula. The only difference is that here I specify the month. So now I can do an aggregation based on my Google Search Console data. So let's say I grab my week as my dimension, and then I want to do, let's say, sum of this. Maybe I want to average something for the sake of the demo. I'll just keep it super simple. And then we'll have less data aggregated on a weekly level, just like this over here. All right, wonderful. So let's go to the next example. I've preloaded some of my Pipedrive data over here. And please note that some things in here, such as people email by the API, is returned in like a JSON array format with the additional set of these square brackets. So if I ever wanted to extract the email from this data, the formula feature would come in very, very helpful. What we would need to do is, first of all, we'd need to do the JSON extract, because we will be extracting the data from the JSON array in here. And then we need to trim the little square brackets in order to make this a JSON format first, and then we extract the value, which in this case is the key for the email. And then this is exactly what we get, just the emails. This will be blurred out for the security purposes and privacy purposes, but you should be able to see that we just get the email out of this. So feel free to try this formula if you ever come across a situation like this. Next up, let's take a look at something super simple, but still very, very useful. One of the more basic applications of this formula feature is actually adding a new column with a hard-coded value. It is just as simple as it sounds, but it's very, very useful, especially when you're trying to blend in together multiple data sets that are not really related to one another, or if you're trying to blend in something like Google Ads and Facebook ads and you need to have a column to be used as your identifier once you extract it to Sheets or Looker Studio to then filter out that data, based on this new column. So I simply add a column named data source, and then I hard code the value in quotation marks, and then that's literally what it does. Now I have a column that says Google Ads in here, and then if I wanted to blend this with my meta ads, granted that I also have the same column in here, which I derived in a very similar fashion, except for, in this case, I also included a publisher platform breakdown in the data. So instead of hard coding Meta or Facebook ads only, I have a conditional statement that says, hey, if my publisher platform has Instagram or matches Instagram value, we will treat it as Instagram ads. Everything else will be treated as Facebook ads. So now when I do an append for Meta and Google, this data source column is going to be here serving the identifier purpose once I extract it to something like a Looker Studio and so on, providing me a cohesive data set from which I can build a dashboard and apply filters that will work properly. And last but not least, let's take a look at the meta ads that I've plugged in, and there'll be actually a few different examples that I want to show you here. So number one, if you look at the campaign names over here, you'll see that I have some naming conventions, and it's a common scenario for people who run advertisement on PPC platforms is to add some sort of a tag or some sort of a placeholder thing which would serve as a category or something else. If I ever wanted to extract this from a campaign name into a separate column to then once again use as a filter or for aggregations or anything like that, I can use one of the more powerful formulas we have, which is regex extract. You don't need to know regular expressions to do this. Good news is that any AI tool such as ChatGPT or Claude will be able to easily give you proper regex for this, or if there is a need, get in touch with our support, we'll be able to assist. So this regex basically tells me to look for all the symbols between these square brackets and just return it as a new column. So that's exactly what I get. Another application which falls under more simple but still very useful things would be being able to calculate new metrics based on what we already have. So if you look at the data that I've included in here, I have a lot of different conversions. So I left just the total count of different things like link clicks, page likes, comments, reactions, shares, and so on, as well as a couple of custom conversions that I'm interested in. So instead of just sending all of these metrics, which I can still do if I need, to my destination, I want to sum them first and derive myself something like my total engagement and then total all conversions for the sake of this example. So it would look something like this. You'll note that I'm simply summing these different columns that will be part of my engagement metric that I'm deriving. And then the biggest thing to note is that since not each row has an actual conversion, so some days, performance is not as great, it's blank, APIs return data to us in a null format. So that's why I am engulfing the sum in the if null, and I'm saying if this column has a null value, treat it as 0, and then sum it with everything else. So this way, the formula works just fine, and then I get a new column that I can use as my total engagement count or something like that. Identical to the previous example, here I'm just summing all the conversions that I'm interested in to get myself all conversions count as a individual column. There are other applications to this. As a quick tip, any templates that our team has already created, and if you're not using them but you're interested to kind of see how certain things are done, this might be a good place to look for some other applications of this column. So let's take a look at another example of a Shopify template that we offer. And this is just a Shopify store sales and items overview. And in here, we'll find a few good examples. So something super simple, such as just subtracting one column from another to derive ourselves a new value. Using something like a concatenate function to grab two columns and make one column out of it. So in this case, we're grabbing first name and last name and putting it all together with a space in between. Some of the more complex stuff would be conditional statements that look at the date-time difference between when order and customer were created at, and then applying a category, such as new and returning, based on this logic. Something similar with the date-time difference to look at the processing times when order was processed and created at, with the date as our measurement unit. Data source. Very simple. We already saw that in the previous example, so we're just hard coding this to have as a column when we blend it with items as our data set so that we can use that as a filter in Looker Studio. And also this interesting cohort month column that once again leverages date time difference so that we can use this cohort month for our cohort analysis in the Shopify template. There are many other applications for this formula feature, so we would implore you to just kind of go out there and see what's there as far as what you can do with different syntax that's available. And if you have any questions, let us know. We'd be happy to help. Hope this was useful, and we'll see you in the next one.